I'm Brett, I'm a psychic medium, and I am going to explain some approaches and tools for your psychic and mediumship abilities. I covered the clairs in another video. These are the clairvoyants, so seeing, clairaudience, clairhearing, clairgustance, that's taste, clairalience, that is smelling, I'm like nose, clairsentience, clear feeling, and then claircognizance, which is just clear knowing. And you know what? It's not that clear. It's weird. Claircognizance. But anyway, check out the other video to learn more about the clairs. Okay, first, what is psychic ability? This is receiving information from the other side, from subtle energies around you, being able to pick up on unknowable information with your psychic senses. The idea of psychic covers a ton of different kind of approaches or modalities that people have for receiving this information or picking up on this energy out there. People sometimes will call it intuition or sixth sense or like a gut feeling, and that's just picking up on information that they're receiving. One that I think everybody has is empathy, or I think people have empathic abilities, and these are abilities to really feel things. This is clairsentience. It's kind of one of these things where society hasn't ripped it out of us at this point, because you can have feelings. Nobody tells you you can't feel a certain way or you can't have a feeling about something, but they do tell you that you can't talk to your imaginary friend or whatever. And it's not an imaginary friend, it might be an invisible friend, but people will critique you if you're hearing things or seeing things that other people can't see. Sometimes it is a hallucination or it's something that is not psychic, so you want to make sure that these are psychic experiences and not mental issues or chemical issues happening in your body that are making you think you're having psychic experiences. Does this make sense? People often start out having psychic experiences through spontaneous things happening. These are like dreams, you having a dream that's prophetic, or you will have something that might even feel like deja vu, where it is precognition, like, oh, this is going to happen right now. And these are big cues that, yeah, you do have something psychic going on. Another thing are gut feelings. You aren't like, oh, let me check and see if I'm having a gut feeling. Usually that just comes to you where it's like, oh, I have a bad feeling about something. And that's something to pay attention to, but those are spontaneous things. Once you start pursuing your psychic ability, you get into things that aren't spontaneous. There are some of these modalities, some of these things that happen spontaneously. Well, actually all of this stuff happens spontaneously. So like mediumship, my first experiences with mediumship, I didn't know what was happening. A spirit came to me and I wasn't prepared for it. I didn't even know what was happening. This was when I was a little kid. And so you might have these kinds of experiences where you're having mediumship, and mediumship deals with the other side trying to communicate with you. Psychic stuff is usually more about reading energies or picking up on really energies. It's like being in an environment and being able to pick up on what's going on in the environment, picking up on just subtle information. When you're psychic, you're also connecting to like basically the collective consciousness, or maybe even the Akashic records. You're going and you're picking up on information that is stored somewhere out there in the ethosphere. I think I'm making up words. Talking about spontaneous versus intentional. When you start to pursue your gifts, pursue the psychic stuff, there are all sorts of different modalities you can go for. The things like the clairs are things that basically are your strengths or weaknesses. I hear spirits. I can see them, I can feel them, but like my biggest strength is my hearing. Some people will only have one of these things that they can do, and the other things they would like to do. Everybody wants to be able to see. Everybody wants to be able to hear. But it doesn't necessarily work that way. It's just kind of something that you're good at or you aren't good at. Playing the guitar, I'm not good at playing the guitar. Or playing basketball, really. That's a really good example of not being good at something. But other things I'm really pretty capable of. So that's kind of how the psychic abilities work. So there are certain things you're going to be better at and certain things you're going to be worse at. But there are different modalities, there are different approaches or tools you can use to get to where you want. One tool that I use are my tarot cards. I like the little ones. I don't like the big ones, the normal size ones. Just they aren't as easy to work with. So tarot, that's something I use to supplement what I'm receiving otherwise. I typically don't just use tarot, but I will receive information, and I don't know how it works. I don't know if it's something with my higher self, or it's the other side, or it's just some sort of, I don't know how it works. I don't know how this works, but it does. I do find that the cards will give me information and will validate what I'm picking up psychically. And with tarot, it is a combination of studying it, knowing what the cards say, knowing, what they mean, and my intuition. I think it's a good thing to know the cards and what they mean, like front to back. Study it, know it, but then once you do know it, to go with your intuition on it, because certain things will pop out and they'll be really important. So, if you see something specific, it might call out to you, and that might be a big part of what it's telling you. I'll do a whole thing on tarot. Another approach or tool people use for their psychic work is through remote viewing. And this is a very specific thing that was studied and implemented in the military in the 70s. A special group learned how to do remote viewing. This uses very specific protocols to learn information or gather information about a specific target. The way it works is you'll be given a coordinate. You do not know what the coordinate is. You don't know what this relates to. I'll probably do a demonstration of it, but you're given a set of numbers, and this associates with a site or something you want to learn about, or your handler wants to learn about. And so they will assign this to you. You'll go through a certain protocol and get information on it. It's usually done on paper. You write down notes, you draw pictures, you give all of your senses that you're receiving, and then afterwards you give this to your handler and they do whatever they're going to do with it. And it totally works. This is something that people who they think psychic stuff is woo-woo and lame, they'll totally go with this because it's the military did it, and they use specific protocols. And so a lot of people that are totally against psychic abilities will do this, and they'll be very successful with it. So it's something to look at. People also use the term remote viewing, I think, wrong when they're talking about like astral travel and like basically going out of their body and going and viewing places or things like that, because remote viewing requires a very specific protocol. And so if you aren't doing that protocol, you're not doing remote viewing. You might be viewing remotely, but it's not remote viewing. And I tend to do more of the looking at stuff psychically and not remote viewing, because I think the structure is too much for me, and so I'm kind of hit and miss with remote viewing. But I've gotten some really solid hits, really solid, crazy crazy insights through remote viewing. So I'm not saying I suck at it, but it's not my strongest thing. Another psychic skill that people use is through animal communication or being a pet psychic. You can talk with your pets. They can read your mind. They can see images that you put in your mind, and they can put images in your mind. You can hear them. I'm not sure how far out animal communication is from normal psychic work. I think it's just us learning to pay attention and realizing that it's a real thing. And some people are very, very good at it and very connected with animals and can kind of read that wavelength. And then others have difficulty with it. I have more spontaneous kinds of animal communication, but I've heard them and I've received pictures in my mind from animals. Animal communication is actually probably easier to learn than other kinds of telepathy and psychic work, because animals are already using their telepathic communication to talk to each other and to interact with the world. And so it's not a big step for them to communicate with you. So if you can just tune in, you can connect with the animals. Also, you want to be careful, because once you start figuring out that animals do read your mind and do communicate with you, and it's weird because it's kind of like in English. I don't know if there's translation happening or what, but like I've heard my dogs talking in English. More often they'll send me mental images of what they want. You know, the food bowl, it's a pretty good one. Or like, oh, it's time to go to bed. I'll get those more than I'll hear actual words in English from my animals. And I don't know if that's some sort of translation that's happening in my head from the information I'm getting or what. It's another mystery. Oh, and what I was going to say was, with animal communication, be aware that when you're calling your dog stupid, they know, they're hearing it, and they're receiving that information. So be cognizant of what you're doing with your animals and the images you're giving them, because you don't want to be an to these cute little loving beings that are in your world. Like, be nice. Another thing people work with psychically is energy, and this might be through energy healing or manipulating the energy in an environment. I think this is a topic for something else. So yeah, it's too big. This one's grand and it's totally in a different direction, so that one's gonna wait. Dowsing is another tool that people will use to get yes or no kinds of answers for things. So dowsing, also called water witching, you use these L-shaped rods and you hold them like this. And people that are doing water witching, they'll walk around a field and they will find that their rods get crossed when they walk over water. And farmers and water witches or dowsers have used this for centuries to find places to dig wells or find underground rivers or things like that. And so people can do this and they don't even need to know what they're doing, and they'll walk along and suddenly these will cross. And it's usually through walking across a field or something like that. They will begin to get closer to whatever it is they're looking for. People have used dowsing for finding treasure, finding all sorts of things. Some people use these for doing paranormal work where they're communicating with spirits and they're asking yes or no questions, or they'll ask number kind of questions. You know, I'm gonna count to 10 and please cross when I get to the correct number, and they'll be counting and it's 6, you know, crosses. People have used metal rods made from things like coat hangers. People have different preferences, like copper works better for some people. Some people do better using a piece of wood, like a Y-shaped piece of wood, where they hold on to the ends of the wood and the middle piece will pull down as they get close to where they're going to dig a well or whatever. Some people will use dowsing, and it'll just be one rod with a spring on it, and it's called a bobber, and the bobber will bob when they get to whatever they're looking for or get the answer they're looking for. Along with dowsing, something else that people use are pendulums. And some people need to have certain kinds of pendulums. And this is something you can use the same way as a dowsing rod. The way to use it is you program it. It's either going to be this means yes, this means no, or this means neutral. And I've found that if you put your hand underneath it, it works a whole lot better. I think it's something to do with like grounding the energy or something like that. But so you end up with a circular motion for one thing. You end up with a side-to-side motion for something else. Or it can be a direction. You can use these two Dow's maps where you're basically triangulating a spot on a map to find a location. These can be used to find missing people, get a spectrum of something, so a number or something like that. You can use a pendulum to get that information. How it works, how these things work, I don't know. But yeah, your muscles are going to be possibly affecting what's happening here. Like I'm trying not to do anything with the pendulum here, and it is just swinging. And with all of these things, all of these tools, like every single tool we have, they cross over, and they are good supplementary tools for whatever your main discipline is or your main thing that you're doing. So I can try to let spirits or let my guides influence my pendulum to give me validation over things I'm picking up through my intuition or things I'm hearing with clairaudience. And some of the best remote viewers will use pendulums to help them get information. I tend to not use a pendulum these days. I usually use tarot cards because I find there's more information on them, and I get more intuitive hits with tarot cards. But yeah, people will use dowsing rods. They'll use all of these different kinds of things to validate the information they're getting. And then there are things where it's like you can flip open a book, and you can ask a question and flip open a book and find a line in the book that will give you information to help you understand or give you insight to information. Like I said, I don't know how it works, but it works. And another tool is scrying, and this is the, looking into the crystal ball or using a mirror and like changing your gaze to look into the crystal ball or the mirror or a bowl of water, and you can actually kind of receive impressions through that. I've had success with looking in a mirror and scrying that way and seeing other faces overlying my face. I'm not a good enough scryer, or I don't have enough experience with it to use it for anything other than my own curiosity, just trying something new. But people use scrying to get information. They'll receive information through that. So that's another tool to look into. Okay, with all of these things, everybody can learn how to do these things, or at least you can try these things. Some things are going to work really well and you might be surprised, and then other things are going to be like, nah, I'm not feeling it. That's me and dowsing rods. Nah, I'm not feeling it. So instead of the dowsing, I would do muscle testing. This is where you are asking yes or no questions and seeing how your body reacts. And mostly I've seen this done with other people trying things out. They'll have you hold something and push on your arm, and your body will react different ways depending on the questions that are asked or the object being put in your hand or whatever. It's weird. I'd say the biggest thing you can do right now, though, is to pay attention to the impressions you're getting. You are getting a bunch of random thoughts in your head and random images. You're hearing random things in your head. Pay attention to those. Pay attention to the things you're drawn to, the things that catch your attention, because those are likely psychic impressions you're getting. And so just pay attention to it and go with it. You don't need to make a stand and say, oh, this is a psychic thing, but just pay attention to it, appreciate it, and let it come in. Tell your guides that you want more of this. Tell the universe that you're open to receiving more impressions, and then pay attention. I think everybody's psychic. I think everybody is capable of being open, but I don't think everybody pays attention. And you hear me over and over again in these videos where I'm saying, oh, I wish I was open, or, you know, oh, I'm not open, or whatever, right? I'm complaining about this, and the other side's like, dude, you're open, just pay attention. And so, yeah, just pay attention. I just need to pay attention. I feel like I've got somebody on the other side talking to me again. Like tapping on my shoulder. It's on this shoulder. On this shoulder. I don't know if I messed up the mic right there. On this shoulder, tapping on my shoulder, and then they're kind of like, no, it can wait. Welcome. Welcome to the club. All right, if you've gotten anything out of this, please subscribe, please comment. Let me know. There's traffic going on behind me. If you use any tools, please tell me about those. Tell me about your modalities. I love to hear about you guys. I love to hear what you're doing. So, thanks for watching.